Thank you, everyone. I'd like to call the City Council special meeting for Thursday, May 23rd, 2019 to order. Madam City Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
I will. Mayor Christy Malchow.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Karen Moran.
Present.
Councilmember Tom Hornish.
Present.
Councilmember Jason Ritchie.
Here.
Councilmember Chris Ross.
Present.
Councilmember Pam Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Ramiro Valderrama.
Present.
Okay, Madam City Clerk, we do have a quorum. Councilmember Stewart, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Certainly.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. For all in attendance this evening, we do not have public comment. We are having a public hearing. If you've already testified in that hearing, I'd ask that to keep the appearance of fairness for all parties that you not testify a second time. Do you have a
question?
Yes.
That's never been done. I've never seen that in the city done before. If anybody else can show me.
If they come up and testify a second time, then I will not stop anyone. But I think it just for the I talked to our city attorney prior to this, just for the appearance of fairness, because this is a continuation of the hearing. So some would get more time than others. But I will not stop. I will not stop anyone from coming up and testifying a second time if they choose.
Thank you.
Okay. First, I have David Steele.
Understand some things because I don't understand everything.
Sure. So this is a public hearing. This is amending chapters 14A, 14A.10, 21A.15 of the Sammamish Municipal Code. This is relative to the transportation concurrency and level of service for road segments and corridors.
Okay, so is this a continuation of the meeting that was was in November?
No, this is a continuation of the public hearing that was opened on May 7th.
May 7th?
Yes.
Okay, so I wasn't there, so this is my first.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, great. So I'm representing the community of Sahali.
Is your mic on? There should be a light.
Is it on?
There you go. Just maybe a little closer to it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm representing the community of Sahali. There's 525 homes in Sahali, so probably well over 1,000 residents. The only thing I would say, we can get into an argument of V over C and all those types of things, concurrency. I'm not sure that I have the correct answer. We've heard from attorneys saying that there's no necessity to ever build more lanes on Sahali Drive West, or excuse me, Sahali Way, okay? No matter what happens, you don't have to build lanes, you know, and just staying with the GMA. Also, the other side of that is with the GMA, it doesn't mean if you have an arterial that's not working very well, that all of a sudden you're not going to be able to have growth. You're not going to be able to provide growth. So there's a lot of different things that are ebbing and flowing. And I guess my biggest complaint is I feel like we've, as a public, and I'm speaking only for Sahali and myself, we haven't been kept informed on what you're doing. Ever since November when this occurred, it's kind of like a little piece of information here, a little piece of information there. Even tonight, I know you want to make things permanent on the 6-month V over C, but what does that really mean? What is the 1.1 really going to do for the city? Does it mean that it's going to be able to, in your opinion, take growth out of the equation, maybe put growth into the equation? I don't want the spending of money on Sahali Way to be a frivolous act in order to check a box somewhere. The engineering on that, which I'm sure you haven't done yet, would be ridiculous. So other than doing a few safety issues on Sahali Way, you're not going to put another lane there. It's not going to happen. And it certainly isn't going to affect traffic. So I'm going to leave that as it is. That's kind of the opinion that I've got driving Sahali Way and looking at where the ditches are and all the fall-offs, all the cliffs and everything. I'm assuming you don't want to take the golf course out of the picture, because you'd have to do that in order to go the other direction on engineering. So I'm just saying, I don't think this is a viable thought to spread Sahalee Way into a larger arterial. There must be something else going on, and I don't think you're communicating effectively on what you really want to do. So that's kind of my thought there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, I have Stephanie Stevens, followed by Celia Wu.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for having me on. I'm Stephanie Stevens. I am a resident of...
Stephanie, we do need your address too, for the record. Thank you. That's okay.
This is on. There we
There
go.
we go.
I live at 2120 Sahalee Drive East. I am the recipient of a flyer that went around my community that said that there was a special hearing for the Sahalee widening project. I've followed council meetings as closely as I can, and never have heard that term ever before. But I do realize that we're here to discuss concurrency. A little background on me: I am a COO. I build companies. I build them in the for-profit, in the nonprofit, and in the public benefit space. I couldn't do it and be effective and hired over and over again if I didn't create sustainable models with solid infrastructure. When I look at some of the growth that's being presented in Sahalee, or in Sammamish, excuse me, I'm really concerned about infrastructure. I'm concerned about schools being overcrowded. I am concerned about, public access to transportation being an issue, a safety issue. We don't even have proper pedestrian access to a lot of bus stops. They're not well lit. But there's such a focus on growth. And so with that and my concern for overgrowth, until proper infrastructure is built, I want to voice up and say that I support concurrency model 1.1. I do know that that may or may not result in the need to widen Sahalee. I agree with Mr. Steele that it doesn't seem very feasible, but I'm not an engineer. So I want to be careful with the way that things are communicated with the Sahalee community. There's a lot of chaos in the confusion that what is happening tonight is a vote to simply widen Sahalee Way. I've tried to communicate it otherwise, but that's what's been communicated with them. And it's a problem. I was asked by a couple of residents to speak for them. I otherwise just encourage them to send emails because I really don't want to take proxy. But I want you to know that there is confusion, and I would really like to see the city focus on infrastructure development before anything, especially for our schools. Lake Washington School District will not remain #1 if our student-to-teacher ratio keeps getting worse. And I'm not a not-in-your-backyard kind of person. I want affordable housing and all of these wonderful things, but they need to make sense first. We're not going to have a strong city if we don't have a strong infrastructure. And welcome, new city manager. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Celia Wu, followed by Ken Gamblin.
Celia Wu, 2729 204th Lane Northeast. And it's with some irony that we're talking about, well, actually, can you please not start it yet, please?
Oh, okay.
Okay, it's just some irony that we're talking about concurrency when there's this huge traffic stop mess up on Sahalee, just FYI. So I think a lot of people are trying to make their way here, but there was apparently a light out or something like that. So just FYI, okay? So if you could reset it to 3 minutes, please, thank you.
I think she just hit it.
Okay,
It's okay.
fine. I admit that I never really paid attention to the concurrency debate before. I trusted that council members would hold true to campaign promises of looking after constituents' concerns, protecting the environment, and maintaining the quality of life we have all worked so hard for when we chose to live here in Sammamish. I started paying attention when I found out that false concurrency data was used to greenlight development. This was uncovered by a citizen. While the details around the concurrency discussion can really be tedious, if the outcome of these discussions is overdevelopment at the sacrifice of your constituents' quality of life, then I'm paying attention. We as citizens are compelled to understand how you are voting and the long-term impact of your votes. We put you in office to legislate to your citizens' concerns. No one put you in office to advocate for special interests or developers, and I know you agree. But when the concurrency discussions turn to accommodations your constituents need to make that will benefit developers and landowners, I get confused. We get confused. We didn't put you in office to make a judgment call on how much pain is acceptable in crowded schools and crowded roads. We put you in office to protect us, our homes, and the environment. The citizens of Sammamish will have an upcoming vote for 3 seats on City Council. While I may not agree with some candidates' positions, I do appreciate when candidates are upfront in supporting the town center and changing concurrency to allow its development. Some citizens may want that, some citizens may not. At least be transparent and tell us where you stand. We need to be informed voters, and as we have learned, votes have consequences. I live in Timberline Ridge, a mile away from the intersection of Sahalli and 37th, where the traffic light is out. I share the same concerns as the citizens of Sahalli and wish you would come and listen to the citizens of Timberline as you have with Sahalli. At the last hearing, there was this discussion on relaxing or exempting concurrency on Sahalli. We all recognize that this still would not alleviate the clog we hit on 202. That was the discussion that was had. To your citizens, it's very black and white. 2,200 or 2,400 new homes in the town center means more people, more cars on the same limited amount of road access we have on the plateau. And I listened very carefully about that public transportation like light rail is not coming to Sammamish, and that City Council really has no jurisdiction over sound transit decisions. I recognize that the issues are complex. I recognize that growth is inevitable, but Washington's Growth Management Act states that adequate infrastructure is required for growth to happen. There is no ambiguity in that statement. Your votes will be consequential. I ask that you keep true to your campaign promises. Transparency and accountability is what your constituents are asking for, and please come and talk to your citizens of Timberline Ridge and Timberline. I'd be happy to help coordinate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Ken Gamblin. And then if there's anyone else here that would like to testify, you can just kind of line up along that wall to queue up.
Hello, council members and new city manager. So I think I've made my personal opinion clear.
Name and address,
Oh, I'm
please.
sorry. Ken
Thank you.
Gamblin, 1830 216th Place Northeast, Sammamish. Can you guys hear?
Yes.
Okay. So instead of going back and forth over concurrency, what my opinion or what my thought is on what we should be looking at V over C, what I'd simply like to do is read off a transcript from the City Council meeting of 10/13/18 where this was discussed. So in this discussion, we had 2 people that were giving us opinions on what a V over C should look like. It was Kendra Breland, a consultant, and Victor Salomon. I think I said his name right. He's here today. And so what I like to do is just kind of remind you what their opinions were on what our V over C ratio should be. So Councilmember Ritchie asked, that's right, you guys. Thank you, Kendra. In your professional experience, can you please tell me and the rest of the council and the rest of the audience and staff what you believe a reasonable V over C ratio at this point for this interim concurrency model, please? So Kendra, response, and this is a quote, I'm listening to the council. The highest scenario of 1.25 and 1.56, I'm hearing concerns about that level of congestion. And so I'm appreciating these concerns. I probably wouldn't recommend going there for all the facilities throughout the city. Looking at kind of the middling scenario, that's 1.1 and 1.38. It seems like the failures that we're seeing there along East Lake Sammamish Parkway, which council has talked about exempting, and then the additional failure, there's one along Sahalli Way. So I kind of feel like, as I'm looking through the data, that is probably the middling scenario with some sort of an exemption for East Lake Sammamish Parkway. Middling scenario being 1.1 and 1.38. Okay? Councilmember Ritchie, again, now looks at Victor and says, okay, Victor, same question. If you don't mind, if you're comfortable, I don't want to put you on the spot if it's going to make you uncomfortable. Victor answers, quote, so I'm kind of in the same situation, that middle one, and I would actually say it may be 1.1 for the corridor and up to 1.4 for a segment. And where the 1.4 is coming is roughly that 1,200 vehicle count, our sort of saturation flow that we're observing. So I'm running out of time, but I just wanted to remind you folks, council members, that this is what our professionals have recommended. The V over C that we currently have that we're voting to continue tonight is what these folks have recommended that we have. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Richard Johnson, 20035 Southeast 27th Place in Sammamish. I urge you to retain the interim regulations on concurrency. And I have a little, sorry. I have to pick it up, sorry. I urge you to continue the interim regulations. I know it can be a difficult decision. I looked at the materials for the packet tonight, and I know you've had to deal with those two huge tables of V over C data, so I'd like to help you focus on that a little bit, if Melanie has the slide ready.
We'll give you a little grace on time
Thank you.
since they're eating up your time here trying to pull it up here.
Thanks. So I extracted the data. Everything on this slide is from those two tables, but I wanted to focus the attention on the worst pain points in the city. These are the conditions when, if you look at Google Maps, because you're planning to drive somewhere, the road is red. So let me orient you a little bit. In the first column, we have the corridors using the same terminology that's used in those tables. Then I separate the northbound, southbound, just as it's done in the table. A critical column is the one headed 2016. So those are the V over C ratios from the tables for 2016. And I used that to rank the corridors. So the worst of the worst, and this won't surprise you, is the north part of East Lake Sammamish. The best of the worst, I guess you could say, at the very bottom is Duthie Hill. So that's the 2016 data. You notice the 2019 column is blank. We have not been looking at any data for traffic conditions. I say it's not obvious there's any data to the public like me for traffic conditions since 2016, and yet we're 3 years in. The 2024 values also are from the second large table in your packet. And those, of course, are predictions for what things will be like. Some time ago, the City Council made the decision that East Lake Sammamish Parkway, the traffic is so bad, we're not even going to try to make it better. And in the first line, you can see that consequence in that the traffic's getting significantly worse, predicted to be significantly worse in 2024. The road that I think is of most concern tonight is Sahalli Way, which is the two highlighted in yellow. You can see that they are almost as bad as East Lake Sammamish, but you have this issue here. When the decision was made to not be limited by East Lake Sammamish, there was a big break between the amount of traffic on that road and all the other roads. If now the council chose to accept Sahalli and not pay attention to it any longer, where will you stop? Okay. How about Issaquah Pine Lake Road? That's as bad. How about East Lake Sammamish Parkway going south? It's almost as bad. So that's one message, is I don't think there's any logical place to go. The other message is when you look at 2024, you can see that already the predictions with no growth that's not already permitted, we can see that traffic is getting significantly worse. The red squares are at least 0.05 worse than current conditions, which is something a driver would notice. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Amy Barley. I'm at 20427 Northeast 41st Street in Timberline. And I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but I've been a Timberline resident since 1993. I'm a mom, and I'm a realtor. And I can tell you that on a daily basis, as I work with my clients, that the three biggest reasons people are looking to buy in Sammamish is the schools, the commute, and the quality of life. And over the past year, we have seen the commute change significantly. It's already slowing down a lot. With more building, without taking care of the infrastructure, our home values are going to go down. I have no doubt will be less desirable. So I encourage you to please take in mind the quality of life of the residents in Sammamish.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council for this hearing?
Karen Herring, 23684 Southeast 32nd Way. I actually walk more than I drive in this city. So traffic isn't really a problem for me because I don't go in these rush hours and school hours and such. I just wanted to come up here and say, I noticed that we're talking about traffic and safety is not checked on this agenda item, and I don't think that's right. Your first job for our city is our safety. Please never forget that. Thank you.
Thank you. Point well taken. Anyone else? Yes, please. Oh, I think he's got you beat, Paul. If you want to just hand that, and we can pass it down the dais. Thanks.
Greg Christensen. I live in Sahalli. Been here for 23 years. I have seen the commute steadily decrease, get ridiculously bad. I've seen housing bottlenecks with no street infrastructure investments. I don't think we should lift the building moratorium until the infrastructure is addressed. There's a 2005 plan that was only about 30% of it's implemented, and I don't know why we can't get infrastructure in place to support our quality of life before our quality of life for everybody in this city degrades. I retired last year, but before I retired, every year traffic got worse and worse and worse, doubled my commute time. And I think that's a priority versus some, I'm not going to talk about what misguided things may have put city resources in the previous for the pool or whatever, but the point is we need to get the infrastructure right before any more development happens in this area. And by the way, voters are aware of this too. That's going to be a primary campaign for all council members who are up for election this year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, City Council. My name, Paul Stickney, 22626 Northeast Englewood Hill Road. I'm going to take a cue from Ken, who gave a real good public comment and just kind of summarized a few things. I'm not going to read this. I would just like you to have it. And a couple high points is, I think the real 800-pound gorilla in the room is growth. I think that's the true issue. And I stutter on the D, but I'd like to say it. I think the real issue for our community is long-term desired land use. And I think there are 4 options for that. One option is no growth, everything stops. Another option is keep growth in the future as little as possible, minimize. Another option is to optimize, which is what I've been advocating, and another option is to have as much as we can get, which no one in Sammamish I've hardly heard ever say that, so that's basically off the table. However, there is information missing in making the decision whether no growth or minimize or optimize is the wise move for long-term desired land use. And by the way, long-term desired land use is a heck of a polarizing issue that has plagued the city the last 20 years. So it's not a new issue, but it's what lies underneath everything. And the information that we do not have is we don't know as a community what people need and want for their housing and economic services over continuing cycles of life for the 6 or 7 generations that live here now that will recur over time. That's the information I think we need to obtain to help as a community reach a consensus, and again I stutter on the D, on a desired land use that we can all rally behind. So having said that, and on the other things I've turned in, I will jump clear to the end and only go through my recommendations, but that's based on focusing on getting to desired land use to guide everything in the city. I suggest that we should adopt the concurrency. However, to carefully consider exempting housing projects that we're short on in the community, not long on, that we have undersupplies of. Start your transportation master plan based what's on the ground today. Do not spend money on major road projects. Figure it out head on, face it, get to desired land use across the board, then finish the transportation master plan and concurrency, and that would bring tremendous wealth to the community for all 6 sectors that make up our city. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sabrina Gachran. I live at 21442 Northeast 20th Court. I'm in Sahalli. I am so grateful that last year you took a step back and preliminarily adopted the concurrency model that you have. So I'm up here today in support of permanently adopting the model. I am not sure that, well, let me say, I would love to live in a city where the V over C stood at 1.1. I don't know if that's realistic, but I don't know what is realistic. So I do think there's a lot of data missing still for us as residents to understand where is that V over C going with all of the development that is proposed, maybe not applied for and permitted, but proposed that we all talk about. I would like to see some modeling of that with assumptions that are reasonable, that we could say, okay, this model is going to take us beyond maybe 2. I don't know where it's going, but at some point in time, we have to, as a community, talk about what this gentleman was talking about, is what is the desired use of land here, and what do we need, and where are we going to settle? So I don't know what the number is that we're going to settle at, and I'm sure you guys have no idea either. I know that you guys have done a great job bringing us to this point in time where we're going to have a model that will help us make really good decisions on a continuing basis as development occurs. But I still do believe that there's a lot of data missing that we really do need help as a community to better understand what the direction is for us. Thank you. Please adopt the model.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Valentin Espas. I'm living 2370 Sahalli Drive East, Sammamish. I didn't plan to take stand here to talk about this, but sounds like every time I'm doing commuting in peak hours, and I'm along others facing a lot of issues, and when I look at the all the proposals, I'm wondering whether anyone in a council or anyone in the authorities that can do logging of traffic videos, logging to see what hours, how much traffic, how we need to do, what we need to do for the roads, where we need to make changes, and whether we should build more or should stop until we make sure that the access is right. And base a decision on these results. Do you have anything like that? If you don't, I think you should plan to. I'll give one thing. I'm thinking that the more, if we develop in the rate that we do now, and the roads are not properly designed, we'll end up parking our cars on the roads. And safety will be a concern. Everything will be a concern. And should probably look more into making a decision based on the data. Again, I'm not sure the council has enough data or is not presented to us, and probably you should put that data together and get a way to, have us see that data. One suggestion I have, when you exit 520 to Fall City Road, the road, splits in two lanes, and one goes to the left, and there is a stoplight. The left lane is so empty that every time I go there and say, why anyone is not thinking about doing something about that stoplight and using that lane to go to the right and free some road, some traffic. If I get the sponsor, I can work on making a bill for that. Anyway, the point is, if that doesn't get people's attention, sure, the Sammamish way and others will not get attention. I'm living here, I've been for 9 years. And sometimes thinking, I don't know, was it the right decision? Again, my challenge is to get the right data and present it to people more than a piece of paper or some, and that will help everyone. And that would be probably a good way to be reelected. So, thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address council before we close the hearing?
Good evening. My name is Isabel Morocco. I live on 239th Place Southeast, right off the Issaquah Pine Lake Road. And I want to thank the council for all their work this year. It's been ugly at times and very difficult most of the time, and it's really appreciated by the residents. I personally would like to see you all hold the line on this new concurrency. I think a lot of work went into it. It's appreciated, and it looks like it would be a good way to go. And I think that judging from the people I know in neighborhoods, that's pretty much how they feel, even though they don't come to these meetings. I know you hear from the lawyers and the developers and the special interest and the people who are going to make a profit off of big development, but there is a tremendous amount of feeling with the residents to hold the line on this. So we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Karen Perez. I'm at 2424 Sahali
just
Drive East.
A little closer to the microphone.
Oh, sorry. In Sahali, I don't have a prepared statement, but I just wanted to say that I'm also in favor of adopting the concurrency permanently. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, my name's Cheryl Wagner. I live at 20035 Southeast 27th Place, Sammamish. I've lived here for 30 years. I really would like you to hold the line and make this permanent, this concurrency. I was so appreciative that you chose to vote and do this because we want to maintain the quality of our life here. Infrastructure has to be in place for growth, and it's not. not at all. So please vote to continue this concurrency. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, last call. Anyone else? Yeah, if you want to address the council, if you can just go ahead and queue up along that wall. So anyone else that wants to speak.
Deb Sogi, Sammamish Chamber of Commerce, 704, 228th Avenue Northeast, Sammamish. I wasn't going to speak, but I can't take it. So we all care about traffic. We all care about character. We all care about our city. We all love it. I've been here since 1984. But we have to think carefully about the decisions we make for our future. And this particular concurrency, if you pass it, will mean no growth, basically, as I see it. And no growth means no Ace Hardware, no extra businesses, no extra restaurants. That's what I'm afraid of. So be careful what you decide, because we do have to think about our vision for the future. And we planned many years ago to build. I'm not on the developer's side with them making money. I'm on the side of residents, to keep products and services in Sammamish. Every day at the chamber, I hear from people, why aren't there more restaurants? Why isn't there an Ace Hardware? Why aren't there more businesses that we need? I constantly hear that. It's a great place to live here. We have great schools. We have everything that people want. That's why they're moving here. That's why we have 65,000 people living here. But let's think carefully about our future and our vision for the future. Yes, concurrency is important. Yes, traffic's important. The commute time is not good anywhere in the east side. It's not just us. We can work on those things with the other concurrency. But with the concurrency you're aiming to pass tonight, I'm afraid we won't have anything else we need in the city. I think you're shutting down growth of any kind whatsoever. So I ask you to think carefully about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rituja Indapure, and I live at 25822 Southeast 41st Place. I first of all want to thank the council. I think addressing the concurrency issue has been a #1 priority since 2017, I believe, and I think the council has worked extremely hard and in detail in coming up with multiple options. And as a member of the Planning Commission, I voted for recommending the V over C for 1.1 for segments and 1.4 for corridor. So I would like the council today to adopt. However, I would also urge the council to start working on the transportation master plan and also putting projects that are extremely important to our community on the tip, because I think that is so critical that we address. And also being financially I don't want to put a financial burden on our residents if we have to fix roads, and I think that is where the city really needs to be cognizant of the burden that it will put on and the kind of solutions that we come up with as we go ahead. I think it's really important that we fix our infrastructure issues. I have lived in this community for more than 17 years. And again, I should say my commute is very short, but I know so many friends go to Microsoft to work or go outside. I was at the transportation fair yesterday, and it was amazing to see so many people interested in transit. So I would like our city to take an active lead role in that, see how we can get more transit, how we can have more companies to come in and adjust their working hours. That has been suggested by the people in the community. So please, let's move on. Let's focus on the transportation master plan and make, our home a community that it really is. So thank you again for all your hard work, and looking forward to the rest of tonight. Thank you.
Councilmember Valderrama.
Yeah, I have a question before you go. Did I hear correctly that you said that the Planning Commission said to move forward with the V over C? I thought that the Planning Commission had said that they weren't going to deal with it because the council had delved so far into it.
I think if you look at the vote, the ultimate recommendation was that we go ahead with the V over C.
The recommendation was what?
That the Planning Commission recommends the suggestion that was sent by the council to the Planning Commission, and that we recommended it to the council.
No, I don't know, you're getting some faces here. I thought that you had said that you weren't going to look, but I guess we'll have to look at the tape.
If you look at the vote was 7-0. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Frank Santoni at 22828 Southeast 6th Place in Sammamish. We've lived up here for 39 years on 228th Avenue. We've seen it go from a 2-lane country road with Sadler's store at the other, down by QFC, to what it is today. And then we've also been part of the process where we've developed a town center. We've been through all the charrettes, through all the detailed meetings over the years. And the town center process was a hard one for us because we really wanted to stay where we're living, but it was a very detailed and thoughtful process. And we have to be careful, I think, when we go ahead with new concurrency rules that we don't derail the town center process in place. There's a developer right now in the town center that's really ready to do a coordinated plan to make the town center look like what the vision was. So I just urge the council members to be careful not to let concurrency get in the way of responsible development. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name is Tom Odell, 2831 220th Place Northeast in Sammamish, 30-year resident here, also two-term council member. I was one of the gang that started this whole process about 3 years ago, and I'm surprised it's taken this long, but I think tonight we're finally at the point of making a decision. And I want to thank everybody on the council, present and past, who has been involved in this, because an awful lot of blood, sweat, and tears have gone into this. The point has been made that we need to think about the future. I agree with that. We also need to think about the present. And as an example, on my way here tonight, coming south on 228th, the left turn lane to Southeast 8th was backed up to Southeast 4th. So Sahalli was down, or excuse me, 228th was down to one lane, effectively. We need to look at the quality of life for those that are here today. And those that may be moving in the near term. I think that given with the amount of traffic and population we have, plus the fact we have not had a significant road project other than the 244th roadway extension since we did 228th back about 15 years ago or whatever it was, we are behind on our infrastructure. That point has been made repeatedly, and it is absolutely true. But we do need to throttle back on the amount of growth we're taking while we fix the issue. Otherwise, this place will come to a creeping standstill. In many times of the day, it already is. I was at a meeting at Central Campus this afternoon, and it took me 10 minutes to get on to 228th when the meeting was done from the parking lot. It was that heavy. So, folks, vote your hearts. I know you will. But the point is that we have a present-day problem, a clear and present-day problem that we need to fix now. We can talk about delaying it until we get the TMP done. However, the TMP has been hanging fire for 3 years. Meantime, the cost of building stuff is only going up. I looked at the transportation master plan today, and pardon me, the TIP today, compared to what it was last year, and I think I saw what amounted to a $50 million increase in 1 year. Now, I haven't put the time into figuring out whether the stuff that's been added, it probably has, but the point is, we're seeing construction cost inflation right now that is just going through the roof and will continue to do so. So, folks, despite the pleas for we need more restaurants up here, I'm sorry, I don't need another pizza place. We have enough already. The Petco place that was part of the new town center project has already gone belly up. So there's something going on here. Anyway, folks, I encourage you to keep in mind that the last election was...
Tom, I do need you to wrap up.
Building up around this whole issue. There's an election coming up now, and there'll be another election in 2 years after this one. and I think the issues will remain the same. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I don't see any takers. I am going to close the public hearing. Council, we do need to back up because we did not approve the agenda. So entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Did. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of approval of the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, by a vote of, I assume Karen was there, 7-0, the agenda is approved.
Aye was an aye.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Okay, so staff, do you have a presentation or
We don't have a
just here for questions if we have them?
That's correct. Good evening, Mayor Malchow, members of the council. Doug McIntyre and Cheryl Passon here with the Department of Public Works. Because we have done most of the substantive presentation in previous meetings, we'll just be here for question and answer. I do want to take a quick moment, though, to note that the agenda was updated today, or the agenda packet, I'm sorry, was updated today. Exhibit 1, the ordinance, there was an error in the numbering, so we corrected the numbering in the sections. We also added a recital to reference tonight's continued public hearing. Just wanted to note that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I will turn it over to council.
So we're first doing questions?
Yeah, if you have any questions for staff. Councilmember Valderrama.
Yeah. Cheryl, Rick, VC checking the box, as was mentioned earlier, aside, taking the VC checking the box aside, for the $54 million for that middle lane, what is the net real effect for Sammamish, given 202 is the stop?
So as you'll see in your packet, there's a table. I think it's a couple pages in with the yellow highlights. You'll see that with the Sahalli project all the way from Northeast 12th all the way to the city limits, 3 lanes, basically median right turn pockets and a few others. There are several intersections that would be upgraded. You would go from a 1.16 in 2024.
No, aside from the 1.6 and the VCs.
So you'll pass concurrency.
Yeah,
As far
I
as
understand it'll
drivers
pass concurrency, but those are, again, checking the box to pass a standard. I'm asking, as they like to say, what is the net number of cars that we're going to be able to get past faster, get down there, or time faster, since we're still hitting 202? I understand that we would check the box for concurrency if they have, but what's the real net effect for how many cars?
We didn't run that kind of model. We do have an improvement in the level of service at the 28th in Sahalli intersection. Certainly that makes a big difference, since at your intersections you're measuring seconds of delay. But as far as the number of cars that will make it all the way through 202 in Sahalli or even beyond that, because these numbers are averages, maybe Victor Salman, who's one of our traffic consultants, that number is not sure that we can give that to you.
Yeah. And the second part to Cheryl.
Maybe we can have Victor comment on that.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. So I think what I hear you getting at is more the driver experience. So that V over C, whether it's 1.1, 1.05, most drivers will not translate that into an improved experience. On an extreme level, I can give you an example. Imagine you're on a road on the side of a cliff with no guardrail. That's one experience versus that same road, exactly the same with a guardrail, feels a lot better. Level of service is actually, it's driver satisfaction. It's not just numbers of cars. So the way, what adding the medians does is it avoids the possibility, potentially if it's a landscape median, of having a head-on collision when some frustrated driver tries to pass someone else that's going a little slower. It gets left-turning vehicles out of the way. It gets right-turning vehicles out of the way. It places a vertical curb between cars and pedestrians that would be on a sidewalk. So it's a holistic level of service. The number is you need to think of it as a trigger. It's the trigger to say, we need more than we have today. Exactly what it looks like, I think, is what you need to work through next. But by keeping the V over C you have now, you're saying today is unacceptable. Maybe we're not exactly sure what the future improvement is. It's probably not 5 lanes with bike lanes on both sides, landscape strips and everything else. But it might be a really good 2-lane road with bike lanes and sidewalks. It might be a good 3-lane road. But think of the V over C as the trigger to require an improvement before more development occurs. You have some time to figure out what that improvement is.
I understand, but I guess I'm still trying to figure out, and you mentioned it earlier, the driver experience. Will people be noticeably getting any faster to the stoplight at 202 by putting those median lanes in and spending $54 million versus spending that on other issues?
Faster? Probably not.
That's what
Safer,
I expected.
yes.
The second thing, going back, as they like to quote you, I like to quote you, or at least paraphrase you, October 22nd, and the council meeting, we had a meeting here and we asked you about Sahalli and your recommendation on Sahalli and the V over C. At that time, paraphrasing, because I don't have it, but we can pull it up on the tape. As I recall, you at that point said what you would recommend, and I don't know if you gave it much thought or not, but you said is put a V over C of 2.0, be able to start making the adjustments, turn lanes, lights, other changes in there, then tighten it down to avoid putting 7 lanes and spending $100 million on Sahalli. And so I'd like to, would that still be your opinion that we have to have a higher number, as you also, by the way, had stated, I believe it was in the January 3rd about the 1.2 failing, to be able to make these changes before you start tightening it down, because the highway capacity manual methodology, as you had pointed out, basically requires you, the only solution is, I think you used the word a blunt instrument that you're using, requires more lanes.
Correct. So I'm not sure exactly. I guess we'll have to look at the tape to see what I said when the transcript that was read. I do remember clearly in terms of where the 1.4 came. That is roughly the highest amount of traffic we've counted in a single lane in Sammamish anywhere. It's about the AM peak going northbound in the morning on both Sahalli Way and East Lake Sammamish Parkway. They're essentially saturated. So that's where the 1.4 came from. And translating that, what I'm hearing is the community is saying that is an unacceptable volume of traffic on a single lane for whatever reason, whether they're going too slow, whether they were rear-ended because someone else didn't stop, which I observed 2 of those on my commute today. So that's where that number came from. Yes, it is currently it's a blunt instrument because the current formula is much more responsive to a new lane. In my opinion, the credit that's being given for a left turn pocket or a right turn pocket, or perhaps ITS, maybe those credits are a little low. And I think that's what you should look at in the transportation master plan is what are those improvements to the corridor that improve driver satisfaction or other actually user satisfaction. We've focused a lot over the last 2 years on just drivers. If you want people to use transit, they need to be able to get from their home to the bus stop. The bus stop is not every 10 feet along the corridor. You might have to walk a quarter mile along a road to get to a transit stop. There needs to be a stop for the bus, potentially a pullout for the bus. If you want people on bicycles, you need that facility and it needs to be safe. So again, that 1.4 is the volume that I hear people saying is unacceptable. So to me, that's a reasonable trigger to say, that's it before we do something more to the road.
Thank you.
Oh, no, unfortunately we cannot. Councilmember Stewart.
Christy, can you put me in the queue? I don't know. I'm not sure I have the right number for you.
Yep.
First, I'd like to thank all of the folks who came out and gave comment. There were a lot of questions from people, and I want to take a minute to address some of those. So first, I want to say that I agree with many of you. I think we as a council have not done a good enough job of really breaking down how this works for you and providing you enough information, and I think we need to work on that going forward. Someone asked, what is the 1.1 really do for the city? You know, people asked about safety. Most people, when I tried to take notes here, most people, your concerns are a couple of things. Safety, quality of life. And I have to say that I couldn't agree more. What I think is really important when we when we think about these things is to try to understand what these numbers do mean, and they are confusing. So I just want to explain for a moment where we have some challenges. So Victor touched on it a little bit. Concurrency is supposed to be the test of the efficiency of our transportation system. Right now, we don't have a transportation system because we have put the transportation master plan on hold for the last year and a half. And so we really do need to have a transportation master plan, and we really need to complete that. The challenge with the V over C as it is today, so what V over C really means is it means the measured volume over a calculated capacity. And right now, the calculated capacity as it's set on Sahalli right now is about 950 cars. As Victor mentioned, we have measured 1,400. So that in and of itself is broken because you can't have a capacity of 950 if you have a volume of 1,400. That would be like putting 20 ounces of water in a 12-ounce glass. It's not possible, right? If you have 20 ounces of water in a container, the capacity of that container is at least 20 ounces. And so the number 1.1 and the number 1.4, those numbers aren't bad numbers. Those are good numbers. The problem we have right now is that the capacity number in this V over C calculation is wrong. And it's not to say that I want something. I'm not looking at this as we should pass it, we should fail it. I'm looking at this. Do we need to invest in our infrastructure? Absolutely. Someone said, you know, we need to stand up to our campaign promises. I campaigned on that. I had a conversation with Councilmember Hornish in December of 2017 before I took office, and I said, we need to invest in our infrastructure. And he said that spending money on our infrastructure isn't an investment, it's just spending money. Because an investment, it means that I get my money back and then some. I see value in it. I see value in improved standard of living, opportunities for our children to be able to move around safely around the city, right? I would love for my preteen and my tween to be able to go out and safely ride her bike to somewhere and have that independence in the safest city in the state, right? Our kids should be able to be out and starting to do those independent things, but we don't have the right safety projects in place. I want more time with my kids and less time driving in traffic. But the traffic that some of these folks brought up, the traffic problems aren't necessarily in Sammamish. They're in Redmond. They're on 202. We need to be addressing all of this, right? A lot of these backups that we're talking about on the north end of the city, those originate in Redmond. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I know this because I've been commuting to Microsoft for 16 and a half years. I'm not saying we don't have things we need to fix here. We absolutely do, right? And so I don't want to spend my time, though, when I get home after I fight that traffic through Redmond, having to drive back to Redmond to get all of my services or to Issaquah. And that's where quality of life comes into play. What are the things we need in our city? We need improved sustainability, and we need to reduce the impacts on the environment. So when we're looking at the projects that we want to do, how can we make sure that as we build out the infrastructure and as we make these changes to improve our quality of life and move us more efficiently, we have to look at all of those things, and we have to look at safety. I find significant value in all of these things, and what I heard tonight is that all of you do too. So I don't think that the question here is about 1.1 or 1.4. It's, are we doing the right things? One of the things I want to bring up about this current concurrency calculation, and I already talked about the volume problem. Right now, we're working with King County, and we're going to restripe the bottom of Sahalli Way, and we're going to extend the turn pockets further up the hill. Because if you watch that intersection, what happens is once that turn pocket clears out, and what was that term you used, Victor? I loved it. Now I can't remember it. What was it, the choking, or what was it?
It was
turn pocket starvation.
There you go.
Turn pocket starvation. Thank you, Mayor. Yes, turn pocket starvation. So what happens if you watch that intersection is that once the turn pocket clears out, you might have 30, 40, 50 feet sometimes between cars going through that green light. If we can get more people into that turn pocket, we can get more people through every cycle of that light. So we're going to extend that turn pocket. Do you know what that's going to do? That's going to move more cars through that light with every cycle. It's going to move cars faster. when there are backups, it's going to make them less or maybe even eliminate them altogether. But do you know what's going to happen when we do that? The V over C calculation is going to make it look like the situation just got worse because the measured volume is going to go up, but the capacity number's not. So we're going to make improvements on the ground, but the calculation's going to make it look like it's worse. The only way with this concurrency model, the only way to make that pass is to add lanes of capacity, to add right and left turn lanes along the way, and to add medians and yellow turn, left turn signals. But we know in the morning when that traffic is the worst, the problem isn't that people are cutting across and making a left turn and stopping the traffic. That's not the problem. The problem isn't somebody turning right off of Sahalli Way going northbound that's blocking the traffic, right? Those aren't the problems. So we need a concurrency model that is going to, wait, somebody had a quote that says, we need a model. I think it was this lady over here that said, we need a model that's going to help us make good decisions for our infrastructure going forward, and we absolutely do. This concurrency model, as it's designed, is going to have us spend money developing solutions that don't make actual improvements on the ground. They're not going to move us any faster, and they're going to have us overlook things, right? This concurrency model, if we only did stuff based on making the concurrency pass, we wouldn't be working with King County to restripe the bottom of the hill or to improve that intersection, because that's not going to have a positive effect on that concurrency model. It's going to have a negative effect. So I absolutely want to make sure that we are making these infrastructure improvements. We don't have anything in our concurrency model that's going to give us any credit for bus lanes, bus turnouts, or bus stops, right? Nothing for transit. If we really care about the future and making sure things get better going in the future, we have to be considering transit. This concurrency model doesn't give us any credit for transit or for any of those transit improvements. So I want us to make these infrastructure improvements. We absolutely have to. But this concurrency model is going to drive us to make the wrong improvements or to not consider the right improvements. So we really need to make sure that we have the right model in place. And that's what this decision is about. And I just, sorry, it's frustrating to me because I can't imagine that we are going to spend $54 million or more, and we're not going to do, and it's not going to make us address the safety issues, right? One of the biggest safety problems along Sahalli is people being able to get out of their neighborhoods onto Sahalli, right? And honestly, I have to ask you, is it hard to get out of your neighborhood when the traffic's backed up? No, it's hard to get out of your neighborhood when the traffic's flying too fast.
Point of order.
State your point. Hold on. State your point.
We are in questions, and I just put a timer on. That was a 10-minute speech.
I am addressing comments.
Councilmember Hornish, your phone's breaking up a little bit.
Charlie Brown.
Can you hear me?
We can now.
Is that better? Yes, I just put a timer on. That was a 10-minute speech. I would ask that we limit the amount of time for speeches. I thought we were giving questions.
I didn't say no. There's
Robert's Rules of Order that is 5 minutes, and we're not even in debate yet. This is a for questions to staff, I thought. And I didn't hear a question in 10 minutes, so I'd like to ask that we move on or give other people an amount of time to talk.
Can you complete, Councilmember Stewart?
Sure. So I'm just going to say that I appreciate everyone and all of your concerns, and I want you to know that we have to adopt a model that is going to address those concerns. The model we have proposed tonight will not do that. If this is really the #1 issue, adding right turn lanes isn't going to solve your problems. Getting out of the neighborhood safely is important. Having sidewalks to get to buses is important. Having sidewalks and bike lanes to get to Evans Creek Preserve, right? There's no place to walk safely along there. Having bike lanes for people who are biking up the hill. Those are the important infrastructure projects that we need to get to. And we don't need a concurrency model to have us do that. That is a decision that we as a council can and should make, And those are the things we need to go and do. And if we adopt this concurrency model as it's currently proposed, it will drive us to make decisions that are not actually in the best interest, that are not going to address all of the safety concerns. And there are many, many projects all around the city that we won't do because we'll only be focused on concurrency. And there are other safety concerns that we need to address around the city. So do we need infrastructure? Absolutely. Do we want to have less traffic and more trees? Absolutely. We absolutely do. And transit and making sure that we encourage transit and that we account for transit is the only way today and in the future that we're going to be able to do that. And so that is where I have concerns. If we adopt this concurrency model, it is going to drive us to make all of the wrong decisions.
Are you completed?
I am. Thank
Can you take your light off? Councilmember Ritchie.
Thank you. Okay, so first off, I realize just from speaking or hearing from people and speaking with people that there are people that want to stop all development. I respect that point of view. I love my house. I love my house value. I get it, right? But there's a recognition that kind of the underlying law we're kind of dealing with here is the Urban Growth Boundary and the Growth Management Act and what obligations that puts on us because of where we live. Concurrency, as I understand it, means we need to concurrently, simultaneously, build up our infrastructure, whatever we decide infrastructure is going to mean, along with the development of new roads. So what I'm trying to understand here, and this is kind of the precursor to my question, is because we have a transportation improvement plan, we like to call our TIP, where we place these projects on, I guess my question is to the staff and our consultant that's here is, when we place a 1.1, which I think is kind of what we're talking about tonight, on the corridor, on Sahalli Way, on the failing corridor, and a 1.4 on the segment. The corridor is made up of several segments, right?
Got that backwards. It's 1.4 on this segment. And
Sorry, yeah, 1.1 on the corridor, 1.4 on the segment. That's what I wrote. Sorry, I said it wrong. So when we do that, my question is, we ourselves are creating a failure because we are recognizing the purpose of the application of that 1.1, that calculus. That 1.1 is a division problem. It's volume over capacity equals what, right? So we're deciding as a council that 1.1 number means no more. That's it. It is at its capacity. That's it's at its fullness, so to speak, or however you want to describe it. Too many cars, people are taking too long to get there. We are imposing that number. We're choosing that number ourselves tonight. So the 1.1 or the 1.4, 1.1 on corridor, 1.4 on segments, is our decision to make. Am I correct in saying that? Okay. So what I want to make sure we're saying here, what I want to try to understand from a staff end and from a decision-making standpoint is, I think Romero brought up before, our options to deal with that failure that we've created, that we have to fix, are pretty much singular. We have one thing that we really can do to fix that failure that we have caused by applying that number, and that is to widen Sahalli Way, which, as I understand, it's going to cost roughly $55 million.
or more.
Could be more, but to essentially create additional lane miles. Tell me where I go off base here. So I'm trying to understand it, so I'm not trying to ramble on. I'm just asking, if the purpose here is $50 some odd million to increase lane miles, and I know, Victor, you said that there's no way to figure out how many more cars we're going to get. I guess my question is 50 some odd million dollars going to solve anything in terms of driver experience, in terms of numbers of cars going down the road? And are we obligated as a city, taxpayers, not developers, not gift from God, not federal government drop money on us, this is our money, our problem we've created, we have one way to fix it, to add lane miles, right?
So, excuse me. That is one of the options. Absolutely, fund a project, put it on the tip, and build an improvement to the road. There are two other options available to the council. One is to raise that threshold for that corridor or exclude it from the measurement similar to East Lake Sammamish Parkway. So.
Victor, please. I appreciate that. That's where I was trying to get to. So that we can. I want to make sure I understand what you said there. I appreciate that. We're either talking about $1 fix / lane miles, or and that equates to a certain amount of speed and cars down that road at a certain time of day. I get it. Or the other options you said are to essentially, I'm going to use the word exclude. That's probably not, is that the right word? Or, okay, I know we got a little static before the word, but exclude the road from our concurrency measurements, or
V over C. It
just the
has
V over C, okay. Or we're talking about raising the V over C calculation to something higher than 1.1 to something else. So my question to you guys is, what does that do if we say to raise it to, say, 1.4 on the corridor and 1.7, add 3 to each one, just for fun? What does that do to our current, our developer is going to be lining up at the front, at the clerk's desk here with cash and hammers and nails and 2x4s in hand, just raring to go and ripping down neighborhoods? Or is that a way for us to buy some time so that we can actually increase our infrastructure investments and go through our transportation master plan? Does that buy us time? That's my question.
So that's a lot of questions in one question. Let me start with, it buys you time, but buying things costs something. And what it's going to cost you is if you, for instance, increase the threshold to allow development to happen, you're then not going to have a mechanism to require them to participate in the mitigation, because you just said, well, now we don't have a problem, so we're not going to charge you anything, and you can just add more cars to the system we have that we say we don't like. That's where kind of that level of service standard needs to be crafted carefully. And I've heard a lot of comments about a problem we're creating. So Hollyway is not a new problem. It's been identified as a deficiency caused by growth since the first comp plan in 2002. It's always been predicted to be a growth-related failure, so I don't think just because you've changed how you're measuring that failure that you automatically created a failure that says growth doesn't have to pay for Sahalli anymore. It always had for the last...
But let me make sure I understand. I appreciate the road's been a problem for 15 plus, I get it, for Simpson Corporation. Right. There are problems with the road that are not necessarily traffic related, they're safety related. There are a lot of other things we can do to increase safety on the road. Just to kind of bring it back here, I don't disagree with you that there are problems with the road. My question is, does buying us time by going something higher than a 1.1, what does that do? And does 1.1 mean we have to pay for it, or does 1.4, 3, 7, whatever, does a higher number give us time to put it on the tip? Does it buy us time to be able to seek bonds and go down this road without creating, when I say creating a failure, I want to be clear, creating a concurrency failure is what we're talking about doing right now. We can talk about whether or not the road's a pain to drive down at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning trying to get to Microsoft. I understand that. But when we talk about creating a failure, am I correct in saying we are creating an affirmative financial obligation in the neighborhood of $50 million for our taxpayers to have to absorb by doing this, by putting it at 1.1?
Not all of it. There will always be a growth-related share. Just depends how much capacity your project adds. I think the problem we have, again, is that the improvements are not adding a significant amount of capacity because that formula is very simplified. I like the analogy of the glass full being the capacity, and maybe I should clarify, when Federal Highway Administration and the Highway Capacity Manual are talking about a capacity of the road, if I take that same glass, that 950 is the capacity you're talking about, Councilman Stewart, is the glass is exactly full to the top, and as long as it's sitting on the table, not moving, that's the capacity of that glass. The HCM capacity of that glass is the amount of lemonade you're going to put in there and comfortably walk around at a barbecue and not spill it. That is not the top of the glass. That's down a little lower so that there's some room in that roadway for some other things to happen versus your glass spilling or not spilling.
Is 951 our HCM capacity?
That is, It is actually very close to your capacity on 228th out here because the intersections are closely spaced together and you have high cross-street volumes. The actual HCM capacity, if you go a few more steps of calculation, they get higher as the intersection spacing increases. So again, it's that blunt tool comment I made before. To me, the biggest problem you have is that your current trigger, I like to, again, think of the capacity as a trigger. Modifying the C is very difficult. You kind of have one big tool, which is adding a lane. Again, it's a valid point that, well, if there's a bus stop every mile, what's that value? Is that the capacity of 4 fully loaded buses at 40 people each? Is that 160 person trips? That's how some jurisdictions look at it. So if the road design that is triggered by that capacity failure includes bus pullouts, includes sidewalks, it's difficult to correlate that to, well, that's 10 more cars, but it's an opportunity to travel in that corridor in different modes.
Do we get credit for that when those things go in?
You do not now.
Okay.
Right now, this methodology that was a fairly big policy shift. The old methodology kind of looked at some of those things. This new one is vehicle driven. It is looking at how many cars triggered improvement to accommodate more cars.
Okay, so I'll be done here. I just want to clarify. Take the development and, people lining up and to build more houses, just set that aside for a second, okay, if we can. I know that's kind of the elephant in the room, but I want to try to understand what we are getting ready to obligate ourselves to do as a city through our taxpayer dollars if we put 3 lanes on Sahalli Way on our tip. Do we have any other options other than increasing the V over C to something else so it doesn't have we're not right at the threshold, or exempting or excluding or whatever the road completely? Are there any other options that we could apply to that road that would, again, buy us some time so that we can do our job? We've been pretty obsessed with concurrency. We got to get to our TMP. We got to figure out what obligations. We're talking with transit folks. There are things we like to do, but how do we get that time, Victor? That's what I'm asking. What other levels, what other tools are there in the toolbox to help us do this short of, hey, Sammamish, go write $50 million and get yourself 35 cars?
Yeah. So you do have the other tool you do have is your intersection level service. You could apply that to, I've heard that some of those other intersections that you haven't necessarily applied it to potentially, could benefit from getting improvements, kind of having more intersection improvements. But really buying time, just again, there is going to be that cost. It's the lost mitigation. You will have development move ahead without being required to mitigate potentially anything. And by picking the 1.1, I would argue that it's not fully the taxpayer's responsibility because, again, the corridor has always been identified as a growth-related deficiency. So a portion of that $50 million is going to remain an impact fee thing.
But becomes our responsibility when we make it a concurrency failure.
But you did. It always has been. This is not a new thing. Every comp plan since incorporation has said Sahalli Way is a project that needs to happen someday to accommodate growth in the city. You're not making a new failure. It's come now. The first comp plan 15 years ago said by 2020 this was going to happen. You can go read the 2002 version. It kind of talks about 228th and Sahalli Way and East Lake Sammamish Parkway being full by now.
So we're not under an obligation then I'm going to ask the city attorney here in a sec, I want to finish this off. I hear you. I don't necessarily agree, but I hear you. We are not, I want to tell me where I'm misstating what you're saying, and I don't mean to repeat. I want to get my head straight here. We have a failure, a concurrency failure on Sahalli Way that has been a concurrency failure for 20 years, 15 years, X number of years, and this entire time, because it's been a concurrency failure, we have not been under any affirmative obligation as a city to fix it or to exclude it or to decrease the level of service, or in this case, raise the V over C, whatever the measurement tool we're utilizing. If that's the case, if I'm hearing you correctly, that's news to me, and I want to find out from the city attorney, is there a time frame for us, for a city, to have to address this concurrency failure? If we're not going to address it in the past 15 years, and when it's been a stated concurrency failure, according to Victor, are we under an obligation, a ticking clock? What obligations do we have to the city, to the state, to address a concurrency failure, whether it's been 15 years or 5 minutes?
And if I could, one clarification is Sahalli was always on the 6-year tip, so you always have stated that you intended to do something there.
That's not what I'm asking. I get that it's been on the tip. I'm saying a concurrency failure triggers certain requirements for us as a state, as a city, within the GMA to do something.
The reason it wasn't a failure before in the past system is because it was on the TIP and assumed to be completed. That's how concurrency works.
That's the operative word on the other models. Okay.
Well, but
Who's got the floor?
I do.
Jason does.
Go ahead, Victor. Thank you.
So, and if you put it on the tip now, which I think you have, and you calculate what that new capacity is, GMA requires you to construct it within 6 years of the impact of the development. So that's the whole GMA. Concurrency is actually not exactly today, is impact happens, concurrency gives you a 6-year window to mitigate the impact, and coincidentally around a 6-year TIP. So putting a project on your TIP is the first step in that affirmation that yes, we intend to do something and we intend to do it within 6 years of the problem occurring.
So we have had it on our tip for more than 6 years.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Unfunded, which was a problem.
I understand.
That's why it didn't happen.
But by being on our tip for more than 6 years, we never dealt with it, so we were within concurrency or GMA. We were fulfilling our obligations by putting it on the tip, even though it was unfunded. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah.
Okay. So now by doing this, meaning this 1.1 and this whole thing, are we doing anything different now? I mean, are we?
The only thing you're doing differently is the project that's generated by your level of service standard looks different than the old projects generated by your old level of service standard. Your old standard said a bike lane, sidewalk, landscaping, median turn lane project is the solution. Your new level of service says add a lane.
Right.
There's a few other little things that add some capacity. But
I think we're getting back to where I was. So we have to add a lane. We are obligated under this new tool to add a lane when we weren't obligated to add a lane before.
Correct.
So
you were on the cusp. I mean, the last version of the comp plan, you were in a, even in that old measurement, you were exceeding it slightly. You're actually exceeding your new standard more than you used to exceed the old standard.
On the cusp? Are you a little pregnant or are you pregnant?
I have the numbers right in front of me.
I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. I mean, that's what I'm trying to get at. I mean, I'm not trying to, I want to, you're the traffic consultant. I'm trying to understand because it's informing my vote. Not trying to be weird. I'm asking if we had an obligation before and we don't have, and we're creating a similar new or different obligation now from a state law perspective, are we now, we've created this obligation now that what used to be, we can just do a turning lane or a light or something else that costs magnitudes less than the purported $50 million for this lane. Are we putting ourselves in an obligation now with this new policy, this new thing we're voting on, to have to put in lane miles, which are going to cost $50 million?
So let me clarify. The $50 million is not the 5-lane road with new lanes on each side. It is some turn lanes at intersections and its medians. The 5-lane section with an extra lane each way is the $100 million project.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about 3 lanes,
so
which
the
is on our...
the 3-lane is getting you this much more capacity.
Right.
So you will run, if you stick with what you have and build that road, then a couple of permits can come in and then it'll fail again with the improvement.
So this means $50 million. So that's what I'm trying to get at. This much more capacity equals $50 million.
And you're, yeah.
And are we under an obligation to spend $50 million for this? By when?
54.
So it's a very complicated analysis that I would be happy to discuss in a privileged setting. I don't think you want me to analyze all of that here on the fly in a open public meeting. These would be questions that I think the city deserves a privileged answer to. With detailed analysis, with facts that I don't have, frankly. I would need to talk to Cheryl and to Doug about what actually was on the tip, what was the actual definition of the project on the tip versus the project that's on here now, and this all relates back to the definition of pre-existing deficiencies. So there's a whole lot to unwind in that, and probably not something you want me to extemporize
I do not want you to be extemporaneous. I don't want you to guess. The problem here is we need to make a decision on this tonight. So that's kind of, we're at this point now with reporting times and notice and, that's why I'm asking these tough questions. And things come up. We've had these conversations before. So, Victor, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Councilmember Hornish.
Yes, I'm a little surprised that after 2.5 years we're having some of this discussion. The 6-year tip has been unfunded for Sahalli. Basically, I interpret that to be the city of Sammamish has interpreted an unfunded TIP project to allow the continued development, to answer the most recent comment. We're here to make a decision, take action. Therefore, I move that we adopt the ordinance in our package amending chapters 14A.05, 14A.10, and 21A.15 of the City of Sammamish Municipal Code relating to transportation concurrency and level of service for road segments and corridors as drafted, with the 1.1 for corridors and 1.4 for segments.
Point of order, we're still on questions and answers. I still have questions.
We have a motion on the floor. Second. Okay, the motion has been moved and seconded. You have your light on, but Councilmember Harsh, do you want to speak to your motion?
Yes, I would. Thank you. And I want to first thanks for everybody. I'm not looking at the picture right now. I'm sorry, but I really appreciate everybody coming in for the public hearing tonight and the information and opinions and feelings that everybody had. I think this has been a long, drawn-out process. I think it's time to put a stake in the ground. I'm hearing some of the concerns, and I understand that, but I think this puts a stake in the ground and allows us to study it and move forward and get to the TMP that everybody wants to do. And if we see changes, this gives us an option to change it and adopt it and craft it in a way, if we need to, that we find that we need to do something in the future. The Planning Commission does recommend it. They recommended it to us in a memo on 4/7/19. It's in our package tonight. Having said that, I am not for widening Sahalli to 5 lane. I just want to make that perfectly clear. I think that is too draconian for what we're trying to do here to balance the growth with the infrastructure. The infrastructure must come first. We do need more information. I heard in public testimony that we need to consider the long-term land use. I think that's fair. If we don't go to 5 lanes to allow the continued development with a reasonable and a balanced level of service, then we have the other option of going back and looking at the land use under the GMA. But we're not there yet. We got to try to make this work. The infrastructure before the development, but we have a lot more to analyze. Therefore, we need to put a stake in the ground, and I think the proposed ordinance does this in a balanced and reasonable way. I'm done.
Councilmember Valderrama.
Yep. First, I'm going to continue with the questions before I go into my statement, because I believe we still have a number of questions that are still pending. The first one that I would direct a question that Councilmember Ritchie had asked to our illustrious city manager, who has had, would your recommendation be for, now that you've looked at this, and I know you've had some time to look at it, to spend, as city manager, $54 million on that middle lane, since you're in the limelight now?
Yeah, that's a tough question. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council, Councilor Valderrama. In my opinion, $54 million is a lot of money.
Mine too.
So, and speaking from a very simplistic view, two schools of thought. You spend $54 million on something that has been studied, used, it's been on the tip, it's been on everybody's radar for a number of years, as staff has said. What will it gain you, right? You take $54 million and spend it other places, kind of like Councilor Stewart was talking about, and we've talked about doing other things. There might be some value in that. There also might be some value in spending the $54 million. If we're obligated to do something, is it worth the lane? If Victor said, like you said, we're gaining this much for spending that kind of money. I don't know the history. I mean, I've only seen some previous council meetings in kind of trying to put all this together with concurrency. In my opinion, we need to pass something, okay? We need to have a starting point. Obviously, this document, what we're talking about, is a living document or a living program, okay? Like Councilor Hornish said, stake in the ground and move forward. We can look at these things as we go forward. Councilor Ritchie asked some really good questions about this stuff, you know. What are we really looking at here? we definitely have a traffic problem. I mean, I can see that coming in, right? So if we allow development without addressing infrastructure, like our audience said, it creates issues, right? There's concurrency in the GMA in place for a reason. So I might be kind of dancing around the subject a little bit. However, my feelings on this, I don't have an opinion one way or the other because I don't think I've really studied it that hard. But I understand the cost of roads, and I understand how much money it really takes to do that. So why not put your money into the best bang, right? Get your best bang for your money. So what is that going to look like? I think after, I say after, I'm being presumptuous here, but if the council decides to approve this, something, we can go forward and look at the after and see where do we really want to spend our money and how is it best spent. So I hope that answers some of your question, and I hope I didn't dance around it too much.
No, but I like your subtlety. Victor, going back to you, actually, many of the best quotes that I recall come from you as we're going to, and one of yours was a few years ago when we were asking about Sahalli and building more lanes. As I recall, you had a quote that was bantered around back and forth, is "you can't build your way out of congestion" was one of your lines. And so here earlier I had asked you, for that third lane, what are we going to get going to 202? And your comment back was no noticeable difference for the $54 million. On December the 13th, the city manager, Larry Patterson at that time, sent a message to all the public works people and to the city council. And with this new model that we currently have, he has cited, and I had read this previously, we have been unable to provide room for development impacting Sahalli under the current model. The model without major improvements, 4 to 6 lanes, still fails in 2024. Does that still hold, what was put on 12/13?
That, I did not do that modeling, so I don't remember those
But Cheryl
numbers.
and the others were all on
I don't think a 5-lane was maybe looked at once, but not, I don't think so.
You don't recall the memo, or?
No. So just so I'm clear, Larry said that the Sahalli would fail at 4 lanes and 6 lanes?
So again, I'll read you what he says. He says, we've been unable to provide room for development impacting Sahalli under the current model. The model without major improvements, 4 to 6 lanes, still fails in 2024.
So I think what he's saying is without 4 to 6 lanes, it will fail.
Yeah. But without the 4 to 6 lanes,
based on your,
that's correct. And then you're buying time to 24. But as was mentioned by Councilmember Hornish and actually Larry Patterson at Sahalli, I didn't poll the council, but the council said that no one on the council wanted to take land from Sahalli. And we had some Sahalli residents there saying that they stay up at night worrying what crazy things this council is going to do. But because of the highway capacity manual and the way it's set up, your option, as we've talked about here before, is the only recourse is adding more lanes under this methodology. So that to me is a big concern, especially since off the first one that we're going to be adding, we're not going to get any noticeable difference that's going on. And it's even more so given that we've had 5 different entities say that, including the city consultants, and city staff saying, we don't really have a good capacity number, and that's why it's been called arbitrary by everybody, including our former mayor, that number. So we don't have the proper and then we have now a methodology that we've selected, because previous to that it wasn't, and maybe it's good to remind our citizens that previously the model that we had and the agreed upon approach to concurrency were level of services at intersections, both the past council and this council. And at that point, we didn't have to address this issue. It's when the V over C came on that suddenly Sahalli became an issue that had to be addressed under that. So given that, I'm going to see if you agree with the comment that I saw earlier, and I can look it up again. The highway capacity manual, when I was reading it, had stated similar to what you said, you can't build your way out of capacity, because every time you put another lane down, the highway capacity says you're only stopping it briefly because you're then going to have more cars start to fill it. You recall that comment, the highway capacity, and you agree with that, correct? So in the end, if we put 10 lanes down there, we will continue to be funneling more cars and be done with our golf course, unless we're going to be playing the holes in between the cars there. I think that's a real problem with this and fallacy to what's being done here. The 54 million is the first drop in the bucket to give you no noticeable difference. You're going to be paying hundreds of millions of dollars. And I go back to this council and remind you, that's why we decided to exclude East Lake Sammamish Parkway from this whole exercise, because you're just throwing money down the drain, destroying the environment that people are here talking about. And there's a misconception that some people think here, and I'll ask the attorney here, that they think that they can use concurrency to stop growth. And so the attorney, as I understand and recall from Mike Kenyon saying here, is that the GMA explicitly prohibits using concurrency to stop growth.
So under the GMA, the city does have an obligation to try to accommodate the growth that is expected to come the city's way. But there's lots of different ways the city can go about accommodating that growth, including setting up concurrency requirements, among other things, land use patterns, concurrency requirements. And I think this is an important point to emphasize. The city council gets to decide what goes into the models. The projects that then get run through the model, you can't pick and choose your favorite projects to exclude or go through the model, but the city gets to define and decide its own model. So that's where the exclusion of East Lake Sammamish Parkway comes in, and that's where the exclusion of Sahalli Way could come in if the council were to decide that its concurrency model needed to allow for that kind of option.
And my question then is, state law requires you, if you set a model, as we now have, where you now fail, we're obligated to fix that. And the recourses they give you are, as we had said, lifted, excluded, although people don't like that word, excluded, lowered the standards or others, but that you can't leave it as a failure. You're going to have to do one of the options that are given.
Correct. The city has to take some action, but what that is often up to the city.
Thank you for that. I'm going to come back for those are my questions for right now. I'm going to come back with my comments when we go through.
But we have a motion on the floor. Everyone gets 2 chances to speak. So you will have a second chance to speak.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Moran.
I think you're on mute, Karen.
Okay,
Karen?
Karen, we can't hear you if you're talking.
I'm here.
There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. First, I'm a little surprised that we were back to the discussion on Sahalli. This has been on the tip from the beginning of time with the city. This road has failed repeatedly since the beginning of keeping records on this road. And we need to bring it up to date. It needs safety features. It needs a center lane so that the whole road doesn't have to stop when a bus stops. It needs to be brought up to speed. And at $54 million, I'm shocked that is such a huge problem when here we are in the south end of the city and we're putting in a road and we're paying for it when it's not even failing. So I'm just shocked that, putting in Sahalli when we're paying for a road that, is not failing yet is such a problem. So I think we need to stick to the problem here, which is, what do we need to have so that we can move forward and have Town Center go forward without getting down into the weeds and trying to figure out how to disrail everything? Because I feel like that's what we're doing.
Can you repeat that last part, Karen? I'm sorry, I didn't understand exactly what you said. It was a little echoey, I'm sorry.
I just feel like all we're doing is trying to, at this point in time, trying to disrail everything, and that's not the option here. The option here is to try to figure this out, not disrail it.
I'm sorry, so the option
Did you
is
get
what?
that?
I didn't quite hear it, no.
Can you try one more time,
Karen? It's kind of muffled, Karen. Sorry.
Okay. So my problem is I really feel like everybody's trying to disrail this thing at this point in time rather than figure it out. and that's not the option on the table. The option on the table is to figure it out.
To figure it out.
Figure out, so you want to propose an alternative?
That's not what I heard.
Well, you know what? I want to, it may be a number, everybody's numbers need to move, some need to come down, some need to come up, but you know what? It's not to disrail it.
It's not what?
And we should.
Not disrail it, I think is what she's saying.
Not what?
Thank you, that's it.
Derailment, not derailment.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Are you done, Karen, or are you still going?
No, I'm done.
All right.
Can I ask just a clarifying for what she said? I just want to
Sure.
clarify. So, Karen, if I heard you correctly, you said you want us to figure it out, you don't want us to derail it, and you want us to figure out something that allows the town center to move forward. Is that what you said?
Well, I think we need to look at the town center needs to be able to move forward.
Okay.
But I think the town center also doesn't need to move forward with a 1.8. I think the town center is going to have to put money in because some of it is mine and some of the problems with that road. But that road needs to be fixed. There's nobody who drives the road who can't say it doesn't.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to dive in here. I haven't had a chance to speak yet. I've got a lot to say. First of all, we're spending a lot of our time talking about Sahalli. This isn't about Sahalli. This is about Sammamish. We're an entire city. We're not one street. Sahalli is hardly the only project that has been sitting on our tip for a long time. Issaquah Pine Lake Road has been on our tip for 13 years and has not been initiated yet. We are just now starting to get that ball rolling. By arbitrarily raising the V over C here, we effectively inhibit our own ability to prioritize projects and help alleviate the pain that our residents are feeling. We did not create this failure. We are simply recognizing a failure, finally, and that our drivers have been experiencing. So first, I want to thank the staff. I want to thank the consultants, and I want to thank the residents that came here tonight. Many of you I've never seen before come up to this dais and speak, and it's very impactful for us. I know we got several emails today as well. So thank you for coming forward with, thoughtful consideration for what is before us here tonight. This is not about stopping growth, as has been stated. It's about implementing the management part of the Growth Management Act. We haven't managed our growth. We have let it go without investing in our infrastructure. We have allowed the quality of life of our residents to be eroded. Our residents recognize the commute is getting worse. The congestion is getting worse. They don't care if the V over C is 1.1 or 1.8. They only care about getting to where they're going in a reasonable amount of time. That could be home, that could be to a soccer game, that could be to their job, that could be to their child's school. They know what they experience, and their experience has degraded over time. These are development regulations, which is a blessing and a curse all at once. We can get at these at any time we want to. They are not the level of service at intersection that we implemented through our comprehensive plan, which would allow us to have to go through a docket process and only be able to get at once a year. Next week, we could change these. On Tuesday, we had a motion to reconsider development regulations that we just implemented earlier this month. So frankly, next week, we could be back here talking about it again if we so choose. I believe that information is king here. And the more information we have, the better equipped we are to address the problems that you all are experiencing on the roadways. In the time that this city has been incorporated, we are almost 20 years old, and we've basically done 2 projects. We widened 228th and we connected 244th. We have a lot of roads that are still in rural standards, and it's time to grow up. Again, because these are development regulations, and if the problem is truly at 202 and Sahalli, as far as Sahalli goes, We've asked the staff to study that. That is on our draft transportation improvement plan, which this council will adopt next month. And if we address that, if we look at that intersection and study it and understand the implications of a change there, which is outside of our jurisdiction, but if we understand that a change there fixes the upstream problems we experience, we could drop the V over C. What we need is solutions for throughput, and we're not getting them right now. Again, arbitrarily increasing the V over C or getting rid of the V over C effectively eliminates our ability or need, frankly, to do projects. I am in favor of passing the motion as stated with a 1.1 V over C for the corridor and a 1.4 for segments. Okay, Councilmember Ritchie.
I'd like to offer an amendment to Councilmember Hornish's motion, and that is that we move forward with, that we alter the 1.1 and make it a 1.4 for corridors, and we make the 1.4, which is our segment value, to 1.7. For Sahalli only. For the failure on Sahalli only.
Second.
Okay, the amendment has been moved and seconded. Council, please remember that we are only addressing the amendment right now. Councilmember Ross. Okay, Councilmember Stewart.
Yes, a couple of questions here. So Victor, I like lemonade. I like your glass of lemonade. So just to come back to the capacity number, so first of all, do we actually know what the capacity of Sahalli would be if we filled it to the tippy top? Have we ever figured that out? Because I don't know that we have.
The 1,300 or so count that you have is pretty much the capacity. I mean, I went through and looked at some older counts. Sahalli Way's only changed about 3% in the last 3 years. It's basically that 1,300 per hour lasts longer, but you've kind of hit the cusp where now more traffic just takes longer to get through. So you have instead of a 30-minute really sharp peak, you get a 45-minute peak, then you get an hour peak. There's another number in traffic counting that we call the peak hour factor. That's how much of that 15-minute peak occurs all across the hour, and you're in the 0.96s. So there's not a sharp peak, there's a bump.
Okay, but we wouldn't actually know what the maximum is until we start to see it go down, correct? Because that's kind of how remember your curve that you gave us, is that you continue to push more cars through until it basically starts to cannibalize itself. And then when the congestion gets bad enough, you'll have fewer cars going through that segment in that time period, correct?
Right. Yeah.
So
you're kind of at this. Yeah, you haven't gone backwards.
So we did see some traffic counts for that particular segment that were up around 1,400. The only reason I ask is we don't know exactly what that maximum is yet. We know it's more than 1,300, somewhere 1,300 or something higher.
The theoretical maximum we typically work with is 1,600 to 1,800 vehicles an hour. 1,800 vehicles an hour is a car every 2 seconds.
All right.
So you imagine what that feels like.
So let's say the maximum 1,600. That's fine. So your analogy of the 950 is that comfortable, but that's like half. So I like that we don't want to fill it to the very tippy top, but I want more than a half a glass of lemonade. So I just want to make sure that we're kind of clear on that. The other thing that I want to clarify, and I don't know, Mr. City Attorney, if you can answer this question, is that, as I understand it, because we haven't actually shown a failure in a concurrency model before, but if we adopt this concurrency as is, that would be an existing failure, which we would not be able to charge to use impact fees. That would be something we would have to use taxpayer dollars only to correct. Current taxpayer dollars.
That's generally correct. What you do to fix that, though, is...
Right. What we do to fix it is up to us, but we couldn't. So to say that we were going to make the developers pay would be inaccurate, and that's part of the challenge, is that by creating an existing failure right now, then the developers won't have to pay for it. We are obligated with taxpayers to pay for it. So that's just something to keep in mind, that, again, yes, we need to make changes on Sahalli. We absolutely need to make it safer. We absolutely need to make infrastructure improvements there. The question is, what are those improvements? The other thing to consider is that if we have an existing failure and a developer comes along and says, I want to do these 5 projects, and when we run them through the model, it would make it pass, even if it doesn't improve anyone's experience, we can't stop them. They could pay for it, they can tear up the road, they can have us under construction for a year or a year and a half, putting in right turn lanes and medians and more intersections. And if that passes it, then we can't stop them from moving forward. We would have to offer alternatives to allow them to pass concurrency. And that's why I just want people to understand that it's really important that the tools that we adopt are the right tools, so we're making the right decisions. No one here is saying we don't need to go do the improvements on Sahalli. What I don't want us to do is to create this concurrency model where we have a failure, we obligate our taxpayers to pay for it, or a developer could come along and say, we're going to tear up Sahalli for the next year, putting in right and left turn lanes and median strips and a couple more intersections. That's not going to move anybody any faster. And there's nothing we can do to stop them from doing that. Would that be correct?
I guess I don't understand the question. There's nothing we can do to stop them from doing
If we have a failure, a concurrency failure, and a developer wants to come and do something, and we say you can't because there's a concurrency failure. If they come back and say, we're willing to pay for these projects to mitigate that.
So again, you're asking me to essentially try and tie that city's hands on what would happen in that situation.
Okay.
I don't feel comfortable doing that in an open public meeting.
Okay, thank you. The other thing is that in terms of prioritizing projects, we absolutely need to do the right prioritization. By setting up a concurrency that creates these failures, we take the decision-making away from us. We're now obligated to fix those failures in particular ways to make it pass, as opposed to making reasonable and rational decisions about what improvements should be made. So the concurrency is really meant to be a gauge and helping us understand, but we already knew, as we've all discussed, that Sahalli was a problem. We didn't need this new concurrency model to tell us that. We've known that already. The choice to do these infrastructure projects is right here up at the dais. And so we need to make the right choices. We as council need to commit to you that we're going to make the right infrastructure improvements and not tie our hands to certain issues on this concurrency model. And so I think Councilmember Ritchie was trying to get to the point that if we can raise up that number on Sahalli to give us a little bit of breathing room so we can make the right decisions. It doesn't mean we're not going to make those improvements. I am committed. I make a promise to you right now. I will absolutely vote to make the right improvements on Sahalli and all the other roads that need to happen. I am 100% committed to doing that. I don't want us to tie our hands.
Point of order.
I'm speaking to the amendment on the floor.
State your point.
It's 6 minutes and 45 seconds into Councilmember Stewart's time. She has not addressed the amendment. She's making another speech.
I just did.
She did address it at the end.
Are you completed or are you still going?
I have a couple more points.
Okay,
So
please make them. Go ahead.
Our job is to
Let's go into the total of 10 minutes, Christy. We each have
She has
10
a total of 10 minutes. You have
5
about 3 minutes left, even if you have a second turn.
Where's this 10-minute
It's in
rule
Robert's
from?
rules.
Wait. But
It's in Robert's rules.
I know, but this council has never used that, and you've
We
got
use Robert's
Councilmember
rules.
Well,
Odell.
then, if
There's
we're going to
never
do
been a
that,
history
then I
of
want
that
someone else to
Councilmember
time
Stewart
it.
has the floor.
So point of order.
All right. And I just want to address that making a change to the V over C for Sahalli is no more arbitrary than the capacity number that we've selected on the V over C to begin with. As Victor pointed out, the number that's in the packet tonight is an accurate capacity number when we have close together intersections. When those intersections get further apart, that capacity number is no longer accurate. And so again, we need to make the right decisions and make the right improvements. If we adopt it without this amendment, then we will be tying our hands to making improvements that are not going to address the safety concerns. They are not going to address the driver experience. They will cost us a lot of money without doing the right things. So I am in support of that amendment. Thank you.
Councilmember Valderrama.
Yes, we need to do something. I think that figuring out how to accommodate the growth, I'll go back and Victor's the smart one. He's getting some sugar to keep him going over there. We're on October 22nd. He had said, set the number high, be able to start working. Well, this isn't going anywhere near the 2. He had said 1.4 to 1.7 allows us some breathing space to be looking at real solutions, to take your words, real solutions for throughput. We're not getting real solutions the way we're going. In fact, Victor's comment was, for 54 million, no noticeable difference to get to 202. So you're not getting real solutions. As the city manager subtly talked about, you're going to be giving up a lot of other projects that you could do for $54 million across the city that could give real. And we're tying ourselves down so that basically we're going down the path of continuing throwing lane after lane in Sahalli, even though everybody says that's not what we want to do. We don't want to take land, but when you start to take that third lane and now you want the sidewalks, that's where we're going, and it's just the tip of it. So I would support it. This is a good compromise to be able to give us time to work out properly. It also gives us time, as Karen Moran had said, to allow the town center to start moving forward and not derail it as was asked for. So I'm supportive of this amendment. And I reserve the right to go back to the other one.
Okay, I don't have any more lights on, but Deputy Mayor Moran or Councilmember Hornish, do you have any input here?
Karen?
Karen?
My only input is I'm really disappointed that we just seem to be trying to do nothing more than derail everything tonight.
That's right.
And I have no comment.
Okay. Okay, so the amendment on the floor is a 1.4 for the corridor, 1.7 for segments for Sahalli only. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Nay.
Nay.
Okay, the motion fails.
Was that Karen at the end?
That was Karen at the end.
Okay.
So now we are back to the main motion on the floor, which is a 1.1 for the corridor, 1.4 for a segment. Councilmember Stewart.
I'd like to make a motion that
amendment? We have a motion on the floor.
I move that we amend the motion on the floor to exempt Town Center Phase 1 from the Sahalli V over C. So that's to address Deputy Mayor Moran, to address your concern that we can move forward and not derail things, that we would adopt the concurrency model as written, but exempt Town Center Phase 1 that we have covered in our MOU.
Second.
Okay, the amendment has been moved and seconded. Discussion?
Put me in the queue.
I'm sorry, I still have the floor. I get to speak to my
Yes,
to my
you may
motion.
speak to your amendment.
So, again, I've stated that we need to do the right infrastructure projects. We calculated it before. I don't think spending $54 million for 2 to 4 minutes on that section of Sahalli is the right way to spend that money. We need to spend that money on the right projects. I think we should spend the money to make it safer and to ensure we're making our system more efficient. As the mayor brought up, we have an entire city. It's not about Sahalli. We have an entire city that we need to be addressing. We need more efficient transit, and we need to get people to the light rail in 2024 and make the roads safe for everyone. Our interim city manager pointed out that our accomplishments in 2018 were paltry because we focused on this, so we do need to move forward. I would like to see us move forward with something that does not mislead us and drive us to bad decisions. I hope that the council will then consider making the alterations as we move forward, but if we can allow the Town Center Phase 1 to move forward, which we already voted on as a council, 7-0, to allow that to move forward in our MOU, I think that this is a good compromise.
Councilmember Hornish.
Yeah, I actually appreciate the proposal because I, too, want the town center to be able to move forward. However, the proposal is, in my opinion, after studying many growth management hearing board decisions, is illegal. to exempt the level of service and the GMA concurrency requirement for a project that a city council wants is ignoring the GMA. And I would ask if, I don't know if the city attorney has the capability of knowing that. And I don't know if I can find the case, but I remember a case specifically on that point that says it's illegal to do that, to exempt a project from concurrency.
Hang on, Tom.
Does the attorney have any opinion?
He's coming back. There was a powwow in the back of the room.
Okay.
Hi, this Councilmember Hornish, this is David Linehan. I was just about to recommend we have an executive session to discuss this amendment.
It was just getting good.
If there's support for it.
Yes, I think so. That's fine. Okay, so we'll.
How much are we talking, 15 minutes?
Sure, we'll do
Thank
15
you.
minutes. Melanie, can you help us get Karen and Tom on the phone back there? Thank you.
Okay, I would like to amend my amendment to.
Can you withdraw? Your
I'm sorry, I
amendment
would
and
like
make
to
a new one?
withdraw my amendment. And then I would like to move that we amend the motion. Sorry that my voice is quivering. I'm shivering because it's so cold. I would like to amend the motion to exempt the town center area. Is that, or would it be zone? The town center zone.
Town center
The
sub-area.
town center sub-area.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and by exempt, I assume you mean from the V over C, or?
From the V over C,
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
And in speaking to that, I think that this is a compromise that addresses all of the comments that we received earlier, which is we need to make sure that we are addressing safety, quality of life, and looking to the future and making sure that we are doing the right things, but that we are not cutting off all of our development and all of our business and all of the services that our constituents and that our residents need and want.
Put me in the queue.
Okay. Councilmember Ritchie?
So there's a gentleman out there somewhere named Paul Stickney. And Paul Stickney talks a lot about housing balance, and I agree with what he has said. I think we have too many single-family homes for the kind of population that we are going to become over time. The town center offers us an opportunity to have condos, townhomes, apartments in a more urbanized type setting, transit-oriented type development. And I know that's a term that is thrown around a lot, but when I think of that, that's a little bit more focused area so that you can get bus routes in it. So I strongly support the development of the town center. I don't necessarily think that we should just open wholesale up and not have any concurrency requirements. I think we should try to figure out what kind of developments we want to have, including a mixed use and optimized residential development going forward, and the commercial that could come in. We have property tax fatigue in this city, and a sales tax base with commercial development is sorely needed in this community for competition. We have 2 or 3 regional centers, and there's nothing else really going on. And we need to have more commercial opportunities for our businesses, and I think that's a huge opportunity in our town center. So while we can argue about whether or not we have too much this development and we don't want to have our neighborhoods get bulldozed, I don't think anybody, I don't want to speak for everybody, I don't feel that that's what we're trying to do on this idea with concurrency and all these things. I think that by focusing our efforts and making sure that we do have a town center to move forward with those benefits, with a commercial base, with a different variety of residential opportunities for folks that want to retire here and don't have an opportunity, that want to, empty nesters. That's what that town center can do if it's able to move forward. So I'm supportive of it, and I think we should try to look at what opportunities that presents to us rather than saying we just want to shut everything down. So I'm supportive of the amendment.
Councilmember Hornish.
Yes, thank you. I think the amendment does not reduce the legal risk we'd still face as a city, but even more importantly, I am aghast that, we bent over backwards to hear from our citizens, and everybody we heard from tonight is don't make it any worse, but yet this amendment says, well, we're not going to listen to the citizens. We're going to just build, and too bad. So I'm vehemently against that amendment.
Councilmember Valderrama.
First thing, Councilmember Stewart, can I loan you my jackets?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Well, that's it?
No, I'm good, thank
you're
you.
good?
I'm
All
good,
right.
thanks.
Second, I'm supportive of this motion that's being made for two reasons. First of all, we had talked about that it would again allow us, well, let me just step back. You know, I'm having a hard time here with a number of this stuff. We're taking this 1.1, starting down the third lane that we've been told will make no noticeable difference. And yet we keep saying we don't want to take anybody's land, and we know where this is going. Now we're saying we all want the town center, but, you know, let's not let it go forward. Let's continue to try to block it. And so I'm having a hard time reconciling what's going on. I like Councilmember Moran's comment of not trying to derail this, because the town center, as we recall, is part of our comprehensive plan that's been going on for over a decade in this process. This council 3 times unanimously voted in support of the town center as designed. This council then went and passed a memorandum of understanding for one of the developers in the town center to go forward, and then the next week put in a de facto moratorium, whether you like that or not, that term, that's what it was. And so what this has done is the chamber has mentioned many times, hurt our businesses, our small businesses, which we were saying we're trying to keep here. Instead, we've run at least 3 of them, the carousel, the yogurt land, and that sport shop out of here because they can't afford the rents. So the unintended consequences have been, as the chamber has told us, very anti-business. And every time we say we're not going to do something, we're headed in that direction of doing it. I would like to exempt it, the entire Sahalli, as we did East Lake Sammamish Parkway, but for some reason, the hundreds of millions there was acceptable, and here it's not. I think this is a good compromise. It meets what Councilmember Moran said of not derailing the town center, letting this go forward, giving us the ability to start looking in the interim at transit and safety on that process. So I'm supportive of this motion. Thank you.
Trying to see who's next. Councilmember Ross.
First point is we didn't create the failure. The failure already existed. Our process merely identified the failure. And talking about the process, the Highway Capacity Manual, V over C 1.0, is already a degraded status. We increased it by 10%. In addition, we gave credits for left turn pockets, right turn lanes, medians, flashing yellow, and ITS system. To exempt the town center, an unprecedented infusion of housing in Sammamish without any good transportation systems, I don't foresee at this point any TOD, transit-oriented development opportunities yet. And further, we're effectively exempting them from any contribution to the cost of infrastructure or impact fees. So for that reason, I think we need to respect the concurrency as we have established it in the interim. To Councilmember Horner's point out, put a stake in the ground. We have too many unanswered questions to let the horses out of the barn and pray that we catch up. I don't think we have the capacity to catch up on infrastructure if we don't do this methodically and ensure that we are aligning growth with infrastructure. So for that reason, I don't support the motion.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Moran.
To say that the town center traffic would not have a huge impact on a road system is just appalling to me. It's going to have a huge impact. And for that very reason, I can't vote for this at all. I want to see the town center go through, but I was hoping that for some strange reason, I was hoping as a council, maybe we could work together, but apparently we still are not able to do that. we're either going to have to, everybody has to have things their own way. But to say that the development from town center should be excluded is outrageous, because they will put a lot of youth traffic onto our roads that we are not prepared for at all. And we just cannot do that. We've had citizen after citizen come up tonight and ask us not to do that. That's all.
Thank you. All right, Councilmember Stewart, you've spoken, so let me speak first, and then you may have your second go at it.
On the amendment.
This is on, yes, on the amendment. So I'm opposed to this amendment. I am not opposed to the town center, but I think it's been already stated that to exempt 2,200 dwelling units and 600,000 square feet of commercial space on our roads will simply exacerbate a problem that we have that we can't seem to solve unless we put this 1.1 in place. So I am opposed to the amendment. Councilmember Stewart.
So if I may, Deputy Mayor Moran, I would love to hear what proposals you might have, because I think that you stated at the beginning of the meeting that you wanted to be able to move this forward and still allow for the town center to go forward. And I would love to hear what suggestions you would have to be able to do that, if I could ask that.
So she's not in the queue. I've got Councilmember Valderrama before her, and I want to make sure we're staying with the amendment.
If you wouldn't mind when it's your turn again, that would be awesome. I just want to address that I think that what we heard from citizens is that they want an improved standard of living, that we want services, we want to look to the future. I think we've already addressed that we absolutely have to address our infrastructure. That is not in question. At no point will anyone be exempt from impact fees. This does not exempt anyone from any impact fees. 1.1 is a fine number for your V over C, as long as your capacity number is accurate. And that is what we have discussed, is that our capacity number for that segment, or for that corridor in Sahalli, the highway capacity manual does not accurately address that road corridor. And finally, just to talk about the housing variety, and the fact that we don't have enough workforce housing. We just heard from the Issaquah School District last night that they're desperate for their teachers to have housing, and that they're commuting in from hours away, and that it's creating problems. They're having a high turnover rate of teachers because the teachers have nowhere to live. And so being able to provide that. We do have empty nesters that are moving out. Our town center would also provide adult care and memory care. I know my mom couldn't move here when she needed to move into a retirement community. She had to move near my sister because there wasn't anything near enough to us for her to be able to move into. And finally, just to remind folks that it would be years before even the first dwelling in the town center for the next phase would actually even break ground. There is a lot of work that needs to be done. So we're not talking about having houses come online tomorrow. It would be years away. We still have stormwater to deal with and a number of other issues that would have to happen and be resolved before any of that could move forward. So we would be years away, but we need to allow that process to move forward, and there are steps in that process that have to happen before that can take place. So again, when it's your turn, Deputy Mayor Moran, I would love to hear if you have some suggestions that we could come to an agreement on as a council. I think that would be awesome. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Valderrama.
This time I'm not going to quote Victor. I'm going to quote one of the citizens from Sahalli, Harry Shedd, who usually watches this. He says, "Am I the only one who looks at using a highway capacity model in a city that doesn't have any highways to be strange?" And we've heard the limitations that this has done to us. I go back to the point that this is something everybody says they want, that it's part of the plan to give the variety of homes that we're asking for. So what I keep hearing is, oh, it's unconscionable, unprecedented to do this. First of all, we released the long plats, 7-0. Hundreds of homes on those long plats are going forward. Second of all, it was just mentioned that you can't release the 2,200 houses, but this is the same council that not only approved it 3 times, but we agreed to a memorandum of understanding to release the first 400, phase 1. So again, I'm trying to understand, who am I speaking to when I'm speaking and hearing this coming from the council here? I keep hearing putting stakes in the ground, but really what I hear when it comes to me is we're putting a stake on the golf course, because that's what's really happening here with this model out there. We say we're not going to take any land, but this is going to give, let me repeat again, $54 million, no noticeable difference to go through. And that's the first one, because we're going to continue to put lane after lane after lane down there. So I'm for this, to get this in and allow some sanity to come back to this process. Thank you.
Okay, I don't have any more lights on relative to this amendment, but I will make one final comment, which is a staff member mentioned that there is the possibility of doing something called a traffic demand. So maybe staff could explain that as being an option for council. It's not really relevant under this discussion that we're having on the amendment, but there is the possibility for the development within the town center to be able to demonstrate that they're truly saving trips. We keep hearing they're saving trips, but we're so worried about them generating trips. So if there's a way to prove that they can actually save trips in exchange for maybe ones that they're going to generate, that might be a possibility. Again, Victor, I do want you to answer that question, but I don't know that it's relevant right here under this amendment. I think we need to vote on this, and then maybe we can circle back on that in a second. Okay, with no more light.
Yeah, I didn't get my button on. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
I got two things to respond. There was a comment about the no groundbreaking in the town center for 2 years, but the problem is we're not even caught up with our current traffic assessment. We're 3 years behind on that. And oh, by the way, we still have a lot of development in the queue that was not even brought into this whole assessment. So I appreciate that the town center won't start, but boy, we're talking 5 years from where we're actually analyzing the whole traffic situation right now with continued development. The other comment about the HCM, somebody makes that comment. I love Harry, but you need to understand, Harry needs to understand, and everybody needs to understand the highway capacity manual has 2 volumes. One for unrestricted travel and one for interrupted travel, which is in the city. The highway capacity manual has a misnomer. It's not for highways only. It's for highways, half of it. The other half is for city development. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can you speak in your microphone?
Can we find out what, Councilmember Hornish said that there's a big backlog of development in the queue. Does staff know? I don't actually believe that there is. I don't think we've had applications for a really long time.
I think if I'm doing his math right, what he means is we're looking at 2016 traffic counts. It's 2019, and you said 2 years. We'll put this.
No, but he specifically said that there's a bunch of development in the queue, and I think that is not accurate.
Have we stopped development? Are there people still building? They had passed concurrency from 2 years ago. I love staff answers.
Wait, Jeff's coming up to discuss that. I don't believe we have a large number of homes in the queue, but we'll find out.
Where's the skip in your step?
I think Skip left at 7:30.
Left after Tuesday night,
I have a
actually.
broken toe right now, so on one thing. Good evening, Council. Jeff Thomas with Community Development. So hopefully a little information that will help inform the question that's come up. When approximately 18 months ago, when the development moratorium was enacted, we were able to calculate, and we did discuss at that time with the City Council, there was this is not an exact number, but an estimate of approximately 900 lots that were vested in the system in some degree of subdivision action. So whether that was a preliminary subdivision action or short plat, a site development phase of permitting, or a final plat phase, that was under state law what was vested at that point in time. So what that meant was those lots that had already been received through a complete application by the city would continue to move forward and build out. You'll recall, we did have some discussion at that point in time. The council pointed out to the citizens that because the moratorium was enacted on a certain day, that doesn't mean that all building comes to a stop. There'll still be those things that will continue to build out over a period of potentially years. A rough estimate, those 900 lots, somewhere in the 3 to 3.5 year time frame if construction was to continue to proceed at rates that we had been seeing. So I hope that helps.
How many of those have already gotten a concurrency certificate? Because all
of
those
them would have at that point because they were all
have
vested.
it. They were all
in
vested.
in a complete application.
No, but that's past concurrency, right?
Yeah, so to clean up this question first before I get to Councilmember Ritchie, those all had a concurrency certificate. Those were all already transacted into a land use permit application.
Okay.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, how many have been built out so far? You said
Yeah, I
about
think
half.
I think we're in that 50
Halfway.
to 60% range.
If there's 900 originally, 18 months, 3 years, halfway, right?
our-
So 450 or so, plus or
Sure.
minus?
Our rate of building permit issuance and building inspections has been trending pretty consistent with the 2 to 3 year period of time leading up to that. So that, to say we're somewhere around 50% through that would be a fairly good statement.
And when will those expire? There you have 10 years? Like
A
when you
building
get
permit is good for 2 years from its
2
issuance.
years?
A building permit, that's
Okay.
correct. The subdivision, the final plat, I believe were 5 or 7, David? 7 at this point in time. So there's a 7-year vesting. But then when they transact a building permit, it's a building permit, 2 years to build the home.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for Jeff. Slightly different. How many under this concurrency regulation of VC applications have now been processed?
Very few. To the best of my knowledge, we've had a handful of existing lots of record that have been able to come through for a building permit. And I believe we've had one.
No.
Oh.
I can jump in on this question.
No, Doug's going to answer this. Very few, but Doug will give you the specifics. How's that?
We did check on this today. There have been 20 that have passed concurrency under the interim regs, and that's a mixture of single-family, commercial, CUP, short plat, long plat. So, thank you. And it includes the school as well. Sorry.
Move to vote.
All right, we don't have any more lights on, so that works. Okay, so we are voting on the amendment on the floor, which is to exempt the town center sub-area from the V/C ratio.
Mayor?
Yes.
I'm sorry, may I ask for a clarification? Is that just for Sahali or
Correct.
all? Okay.
Just for the Sahali.
Okay, that
corridor.
wasn't stated originally.
Sorry.
Just exempt town center sub-area from the V/C is what was stated.
I'm sorry, from the Sahali. The V/C Sahali. Not even exempting them from the intersections. They would still be applicable to the intersections.
It's only
Only the V/C for the Sahali corridors.
That's correct.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion, I'm going to ask for you again to say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Okay, opposed? Nay.
Nay.
Okay, the nays have it. The amendment fails. Okay, we are back to the main motion, which is a 1.1 for corridor or for a segment, and 1.1 for a corridor, 1.4 for a segment.
Move to vote.
A question I was going to see first. Councilmember.
Is that a call to question?
If Moran was.
Yes, there was a call to question.
Question, I will second that.
Okay, call the question. So we have to now vote. We need to.
On the call to question.
Yes, on the call to question. All those in favor of calling the question, say aye. And raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. I don't know how many were up in the sky.
There were 2 in the sky and 3 down here.
Karen, were you an aye?
Yes.
Okay, so we are calling the question.
Okay, so we're still under call to questions? and we're
No, we have called the question. We are now voting on the motion on the floor. So all those in favor of the 1.1 for the corridor, 1.4 for segment, say aye and raise your hand, please. Aye.
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 I don't know how many you heard up there. I heard
Heard one.
I only heard one.
Karen, you want to clarify?
All right. Those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Okay, by a vote of 4-3, the motion is passed.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Those in favor? Say aye. Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Opposed?